welcome to my workshop on stepping into service without burning out. My name is Allie and I am a resident director at Trinity Western University here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. A little bit about me. I'm a lover of all things sports, especially women's sports. I love to craft and I love to read, but most of all, I'm passionate about seeing students find their identities in Christ. And so I'm really glad that you've decided to join this workshop today, wherever it is that you're tuning in from. Today's topic is one that I find incredibly important: how to serve well without burning yourself out. Whether you work in full-time ministry, you volunteer in your local church, you're a student leader on your university campus, or you're just trying to live out your faith in your everyday life, this is a session for you. Today, we're going to take some time to focus on sustainable service through a 6-part framework called RESTED. The challenge of service begins with a truth that we don't often talk about. Serving others can be draining. Even though serving, we know it to be at the heart of the Christian life, many of us end up tired and resentful or even burnt out. And here's why. It's because we serve with good intentions, but we serve without the tools to sustain that service long term. And so how do we change that and better equip ourselves to serve without burning out? Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt guilty for saying no to doing something or to helping someone? Or have you ever felt like your worth was tied to how much you did and how well you did that thing? Right. This is an all too common feeling, and your role as a student leader might often leave you feeling like you can't say no, or you have to bend in every which way to accommodate the needs of the people around you. But saying no isn't about shedding your responsibility. It's about gaining the strength to give the very best of yourself to the ones that you serve. The theme of our conference is centered around stepping into stewardship. And so often we think of stewardship only in terms of finances or of tangible resources, but it's so much more than that. Your time, your energy, your service, these are valuable resources that you've been entrusted with. The challenge that you face is that you need to learn to steward them with intention, with purpose, and to steward them just as faithfully as you would with any of your material possessions. So, how do you do it? Well, we know that God's called us to serve faithfully. We understand that serving is not optional in the Christian faith. Galatians 5:13 says this: serve one another humbly in love. Galatians 5:13 doesn't say burn yourself out to serve others. You see, Jesus in his humanity had limitations. He had the same 24 hours in a day that you and I have, and yet he didn't try to accomplish 26 or 27 or 28 hours of work in that very same day. Jesus knew what it looked like to prioritize, and he did it without feeling guilty. We can learn a lot from him in this area. Jesus took care of his soul before he took care of others, and this is the very rhythm that kept him free from burnout and full of God. Ultimately, this is what allowed him to serve others with compassion and generosity and grace. Since I'm a sport lover, let me give you a bit of a sporting analogy to try and illustrate this better. Let's say Jesus didn't live his life on the defensive. He didn't overextend himself until he was so tired he had to take a break on the sidelines. He wasn't trying to juggle himself to stop things from happening. Jesus lived on the offensive. He was proactive in spending consistent time with the Father so that he had enough energy and so that he could stay focused on the game or on the things that he was called to do here on earth. One of the other things that always strikes me about Jesus is that he wasn't always nice. Jesus was always kind, but he often said no, and he didn't do exactly what it was that people wanted him to do. This is the very example of Jesus that we ought to follow so that we too can learn how to say no, how to speak truth in love, and how to live without our own limitations. Jesus withdrew to rest. He set boundaries. He led in the Spirit. And you and I have been called to do the same. And that's where the RESTED framework comes in. It's here to help us serve from a place of health and not from a place of depletion. So here's what it stands for. R stands for rest and self-care. E stands for established boundaries. S stands for spirit-led leadership. T stands for trust your identity in Christ. E stands for engage with a mentor. And D stands for discern before you do. Let's take the next couple of minutes to unpack each one and learn how they can really help us. So R, rest and self-care. We begin with rest because that's where God began. On the 7th day, God rested. Self-care is not selfish, it's stewardship. You cannot and should not pour from an empty cup. Ask yourself this. What are some of your rhythms that restore you? Is it solitude, sleep, silence, honoring your Sabbath? Whatever it may be, can I challenge you to actually schedule rest in the same way that you would schedule service? Put it in your calendar. Don't let it be pushed around to decide because something more important has come along. Make it a priority. Rest is important, and it's at the foundation of the work that you do. E stands for establish boundaries. Jesus had clear boundaries. We know that he often said no. The thing with boundaries is that they protect what matters most. Think about it this way. Boundaries are not walls, they're gates. Healthy boundaries allow us to open the gate and say yes with joy, but it also allows us to close the gate and say no without feeling guilty and shameful. So, what are you saying yes to out of pressure and not out of calling? Maybe you need to take a step back from that space to allow yourself to serve better in the space that you've been called to serve in. S stands for spirit-led leadership. Here's a bit of a sobering truth. We can lead in the flesh, or we can lead by the Spirit, but we cannot do both. When we lead in the flesh, we chase approval, we chase control, we chase results. But when we lead in the Spirit, we listen first and we act second. Galatians 5:25 reminds us that since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. That means pausing, praying, listening, and actually listening well and being quiet for long enough to let God get a word in. Are you making space for the Spirit to lead, or are you just charging ahead, hoping that God's going to catch up to wherever it is that you're going? T stands for trust your identity in Christ. Who you are is not what you do. Your identity is not in your title, it's not in your role, it's not in your productivity, or how well you do any of those things. You are a child of God, fully loved, before you ever served a single person. When you root your identity in Christ, you serve from fullness instead of serving from a need for validation. Coach John Wooden, UCLA's most winning basketball coach, says this: be more concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think that you are. Don't serve to prove yourself to others. Serve because you're secure in who you are in Christ and in what he's called you to do. E is for engage with a mentor. Ministry is not meant to be done alone. Proverbs 11:14 says, where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. We all need someone ahead of us to speak into our lives, someone who can ask us hard questions and remind us of truth when we forget it. Mentors are people who help point us back to Jesus when we lose our way. So who's mentoring you right now? And who's someone that you're mentoring? And finally, D is for discern before you do. Just because there's a need doesn't mean that you're called to fill it. Let me say that again. Just because there's a need doesn't mean that you are called to fill it. There's a lot going on all the time on our university campuses, but thankfully, you are not the only person called to carry it all. You don't have to say yes to every opportunity. In fact, sometimes the most powerful way to lead is by stepping back. When you say no, you actually create space for others to step up. Empowering the people around you by trusting them with responsibility and encouraging them to grow in their own leadership. Jesus didn't heal everyone. He didn't go everywhere. He discerned what the Father was doing and he joined in on that work. James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God. So pause, pray, and ask, Lord, is this mine to do? Or, God, what are you up to right now? And how can I join you in the work that you're already doing? The key to avoiding burnout is embracing wholeness, because burnout happens when output exceeds input. So remembering to stay rested helps us rebalance that. Here's what I want you to walk away with. You're called to serve, but not at the expense of your well-being. Your service should flow from an intimacy with Jesus, not for performance. And you can say no, take some time to rest, and still be a faithful servant. Take a few seconds to take a picture of the screen or write these down in your notebook so that you can take some time to reflect on this week. What's one area where you need to rest? What's one boundary you need to establish? And what's one decision you need to discern? I'd love for you to take some time to think about this, to write down some of the words and prompts that come to mind, and then to talk about it with your resident director, your area supervisor, a parent, a mentor, or a friend, and have them keep you accountable to those things. I'd love to leave you with a grounding exercise before we wrap up. So in addition to my work as an RD, I have the privilege of serving as the team chaplain for our women's rugby team. And I want to share with you one of the things that we take time to do before a game or a tournament. See, tournament days or game days can be really stressful and overwhelming. And so it's really important for us to take some time to just remember why we're here, remember who we are before we take the step out of that locker room and take on the day. So first we sit in a comfortable position and we place our hands down and we just release and give to God all the things that we've been holding on to. Fear, nerves, anxiety, disappointment. Sometimes it's thoughts of arrogance, thoughts that aren't so humble. Whatever it is, we release those things to God. And then we turn our hands up and we ask God to fill us with peace, with comfort, with joy, with whatever it is that we need for that day. And we end in prayer, a big team cheer, and head onto the field. We don't take super long to do this, but this short time taken to connect with God keeps us grounded and helps us refocus our heads, hands, and heart to what's most important and what we've been called to do on that very day. So maybe that's something that you can also do when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling like you just need to pause in your day and connect with God. Serving like Jesus means walking with Jesus. It's not about doing more. It's about doing what matters and doing what matters with joy, clarity, and with the goal of longevity. So stay rested because the kingdom needs you whole, not just busy. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope that this has been helpful for you. Please feel free to reach out if this session sparked something in you, if you have any questions, or if you just want to chat. I'd love to hear from you. I'll put my info on the screen here for you, but let's just remember this before we go. Let's serve sustainably, faithfully, and well rested. Bye.